like this is my road right here.
Not anymore. Oh no, Bigfoot area.
Yeah. This is it.
Well, hey folks, my name is Brad. If you happen to be new to my videos, I explore the mountains of Vermont searching for treasure with my metal detector. And today, I do find myself way up in the mountains of Vermont, invited by my new friend Nate to some of his land. And when he reached out to me, he knew that he had some old stone walls out here, but he wasn't quite sure if there were ever any old buildings. So I did some research, looked at some old maps, and I am happy to say that yes, right behind me in those super tall ferns, there is a basement to an old building from potentially over 250 years ago. So today I brought a couple metal detectors to see if we can find some treasures in the ground. Now, if this happens to be one of the first of my videos that you've seen, I publish one of these every single Friday. So if you like what you see here today, consider hitting that subscribe button or just come on back next Friday. We're gonna get the metal detectors turned on and see what we can find. All right, we have a beautiful 86. Sounds really, really good. Rock. Well, we have our first little treasure here. It is an incredible old pewter button. It looks like maybe it's a starburst, but you can see by how crumbly it is. This is pretty early 1700s, I would guess. Awesome. Incredibly difficult to metal detect in here, but you know, we take a step and knock down some ferns and I think we'll find a few things. Awesome. All right, we've got a beautiful solid 85 right on the edge of the foundation. I have a good feeling about this one. That is extremely old. Look at that. I think it's safe to say somebody was living here. Well, when we first arrived here, we didn't really know what we were walking into, right? We knew that there was a hole here, but was it an old hunting camp, an old logging camp? Maybe it wasn't a building at all and it was just a pit that they used for cutting up logs. I have unfortunately walked upon many of those and you don't find anything because they weren't there for very long. This, though, certainly seems to be a home given what we just found here. This is an old pewter spoon. Yes, it could be a hunting camp, it could be a logging camp, but this spoon in particular is incredibly decorated. I honestly don't think I've ever seen an old pewter spoon from the 1700s like this as decorated as this. Pewter spoons weren't as expensive as a silver spoon, for example, obviously, but they could have had iron spoons. We find those every once in a while. So the pewter was certainly a step up, and as beautiful as this, I'm really hoping that this was a home where people may have spent up to a generation. Plenty of time to drop some of their treasures. It is going to be a task to get through all of these ferns, but we're gonna do our best. See what we can find here.
Digging meaningless holes.
Well, I think that this is a meaningful one. Well, Nate found this one with his metal detector. I'm gonna dig it up for him. I have a really good feeling about this one. It's a very low 90 on the metal detector, which to me screams coin, but we'll see. I might have just jinxed it calling it. It's red stoneware.
Red stoneware picks up with metal?
No, that's not it. It's just in the hole.
Oh.
I think it's a shoe buckle. Yep. That is an awesome find. It is super.
It's pilgrim-like.
It is. That's what it is. It's a shoe buckle.
Yeah.
Well, we got another one. People who may have seen some of my recent past videos may know that this is top 5 favorite things to find. Of course, it is a shoe buckle. Now, technically Nate found this one. He gave me the pleasure of digging it up, but it is an amazing one. Not only is it absolutely beautifully decorated, but it is also incredibly long and skinny. I don't think I have ever found one that looks quite like this one. And because of its size and how decorated it is, I would venture a guess to say that this was most likely a lady's shoe, which again gives some credibility that this was a home. Right? A family lived here, there was a woman living here, and she lost one of her shoe buckles. Again, we always ask ourselves how people lose these things. It's very unlikely she was just walking around the property and it fell off her shoe and she never went back looking for it, right? I'm wondering, since I am so close to the home, maybe it was in the home when it was either abandoned or, very likely with these old colonial homes, burnt down. Everything revolved around the fire. They had to do all of their cooking over the fireplace. They had chimney fires, etc., etc. Now this buckle doesn't actually show any fire damage on it, but I wonder if it was actually in the house when it eventually tumbled. Beautiful find. We are missing the interior parts here, the chape and the fork, but that's okay. It is very obviously a shoe buckle, and again, one of my absolute favorite things to find. And it's a beautiful one too. All right, let's see if we can find the other one today. $73. Oh, yeah. Holy smokes, what is that thing? Well, what we have here is a mystery item, and you know, when I find things that I can't identify and they're from the early 1900s or even the late 1800s, a lot of times folks in the comments can identify them, but this one is pretty obscure looking. It is from, no doubt, the end of the 1700s, so I'm not optimistic we're ever going to be able to figure out what this thing is. But when I first found it, I got very excited because I thought it was something that I've always wanted to find and I have never been able to, and that is what they would call a firesteel. So one thing that continually blows my mind is back in the 1700s and even most of the 1800s, if you wanted to start a fire, you had to do it with flint and steel. What a firesteel is just a hunk of iron, almost looking like brass knuckles, that you would strike against a piece of flint to start your fire, which you probably would have had to do almost every day, unless in the wintertime you made the fire go overnight. Unfortunately, this doesn't quite look like one. This looks much more like part of a tool or holding two pieces of wood together. But again, for a second there, I was really hopeful that it was a firesteel. Unfortunately, my metal detector is tuned to usually not find this stuff, but finding this gives me a little bit of hope that one day I will find one. All right, let's keep searching. Well, right in the road here, we've got a very loud 88. Whoa. Look at that thing. Well, we took a little break from the ferns and I tried my hand at the little trail that passes by here. And what we have here is most certainly not from the 1700s or the 1800s or possibly even the 1900s. I think that this is probably an earring. I suppose it could be a necklace pendant, but kind of gives off earring vibes, and we are missing a stone or two. But anytime you find jewelry, kind of exciting. This one is not precious metal. It's not silver or gold. It appears to be a plated brass of some kind. Nate was saying that people do every once in a while find their way out here on his land and walk these trails not knowing that it's privately owned. And apparently somebody lost an earring. He's also mentioned that he's had some issues with packs of coyotes and black bears following him around. So, you know, maybe the poor owner of this got chased out of here. Lost their earring, who knows? Folks back in the 1700s did, of course, have jewelry, but I almost never find it. Very, 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 very rarely. Maybe an old ring, maybe a brooch. I don't know how popular earrings were back then, but certainly not as popular as they are now. Funny find. Maybe we'll go back to the ferns now. Well, one of the questions I get asked all the time is, do we have any venomous snakes in Vermont? And I always say no, but truth be told, we do have a timber rattler, although they are critically endangered. I've never seen one. I don't know anybody who's ever seen one. I'm 99% sure that's not what this is, although as I approached it, its tail did wiggle like a rattle. I don't think its head is big and menacing enough to be a rattlesnake though. It is acting aggressive though. Hear that? Yeah, see, you're wiggling your tail like a rattlesnake, but you don't have a rattle. I think you're just pretending. I just looked you up, and you are a milk snake. And that's just a bluff. You're not venomous. You are big and scary looking, though. Really nice, 85. Looks like crumbly pewter. Yeah, it's another spoon bowl. Man, old rat tail. Incredible. Incredible. Here we go. Well, I just dug something out of right there. It was a piece of iron. We've got another irony target. 72. Let's see. Oh. Well, we know what that is. Well, does anybody recognize this peculiar iron item? If you've ever seen one of my past videos, or really any metal detecting videos, you might recognize it as the shoe for an oxen. Now, the reason it looks so strange is, of course, an oxen's foot is nothing like a horse's foot. It is cloven. It would need 2 of these on the bottom of each foot. And one of my absolute favorite facts about these oxen shoes, you may know that cows, unlike horses, can't just lift up a single leg for you to shoe them. They have terrible balance and they'll just fall over. So back in those days, if you're going to have an oxen shoed, you would either have to lay them down and tie them up to do it, or they actually built these giant contraptions made out of wood that would lift the cows up off the ground so that you could put some shoes on them. I can't imagine a farrier would show up here way up in the mountains with one of those giant wooden contraptions dragging behind their wagon, but maybe. I think more than likely they were put on their side and tied up. But what an ordeal to get some shoes on an oxen. I'm sure that when they actually threw this one, the farmer was upset that they were gonna have to go through that again. Pretty common find up here. Sometimes we'll find a whole set, all 8, but just one today so far. We'll see if we can find another one. Well, I think that was the spoon bowl, right? It's either the spoon bowl or the spoon handle. I just rechecked the hole, and it is a 90 now, which is crazy high for a site this old. Yep, still something there. It's a coin. It's a coin. Unbelievable. In the same hole as the spoon. Well, it's always amazing to me at a place as remote as this, and being very likely a farm home where they didn't have a whole lot, we almost always still find at least one coin. Now, granted, they are usually pennies, 1-cent coins, but still, even this 1-cent coin that I just found, which is a draped bust US large cent, it wouldn't have been a week's wage, but it probably could have purchased a loaf of bread or some amount of grain. They likely would have missed it when they dropped it. This one, unfortunately, is not in great shape. I don't think we're going to be able to make out a date on it, but we can see Lady Liberty on the back. It says 1 cent with the wreath around the outside. And this particular design of large cent was made from 1796 until 1807. Now, finding things here throughout the day, I was speculating this was middle of the 1700s, maybe even earlier, given all of the pewter. This coin, though, obviously it couldn't have been here before 1796. So they were likely here in the early to mid 1700s, but they stayed here for at least 100 years, I would guess, which is very exciting, which means they could have lost a lot of stuff during their time. We are having some difficulty with the ferns and finding that stuff, but I know it's here. We just gotta keep on struggling through all the vegetation. Awesome find, somewhat common for old home sites like this. You usually find 1 or 2 old copper coins, but anything could be out here. All right, folks, well, that's gonna do it for both Nate and I today. We found some awesome stuff. Very classic colonial cellar hole items, buttons, buckles, and coins, and a few interesting iron items as well. We had a heck of a time pushing through all of these super tall ferns. We have already made plans that either in the fall or next spring, we have to come back and see if we can find some more, because I am sure there is 10 times more. It is just too hot today, and the ferns beat us today, unfortunately. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks again for watching, and hopefully I will see you next Friday for another new adventure somewhere up here in the mountains of Vermont.